Hey everybody, if you like martial arts, especially Kyokushin Karate or any form of combat sport, whether BJJ, wrestling, boxing, but more Kyokushin since the show is geared towards that, make sure to look up and subscribe to the Drew Experience podcast. That's available on YouTube and all audio platforms. Also, I want to say thanks to a few supporters of the show. First, KRT Tips and Tricks butchered that there. Sorry, Darren Stringer and Wesley Jensen. But it's the largest online growing dojo by Sensei Wesley Jensen and Sensei Darren Stringer. They've been growing since the pandemic. Make sure to give them a follow, KRT Tips and Tricks. Also, Kyokushin Shuffle podcast and Forever the Student by Sensei Patrick Pinto. Martial Way blog with Senpai Scott Heaney and the work he does with Real Talk with Shian Terry Burkett. And lastly, most importantly, my biggest supporters, Kyokushin Boucherville and Karate Joanne Fournier and all the other dojos under Nakamura who have welcomed me into the association. So please, if you're in Quebec and you're looking for a great school, just make sure to hit them up. There's a lot of great karate schools. I recommend them all. Martial arts is good, but if you're in the Boucherville area or Laval and you really want some good schooling, I recommend Joanne Fournier and Shian Pierre Cataford. And with that, this is the Drew Experience, the show that's 80% combat sports and 20% everything else. God, it's been a bit of time. I've got a bit of rust. Don't worry, we're good. Today, I'm very thrilled and honored to have this one guest. You know, I've been in contact with him for a very long time. We can never make it happen, but the timing is right. I'm on vacation. He was able to get Zoom on his phone since Zoom is a versatile app. I am very pleased and I am honored to finally host. He's a glorified former stay-at-home defenseman. That's a nickname for defensive defensemen in hockey who do the shot blocking, fighting if necessary, and all the other defensive plays like penalty kill. I digress. He's also the branch chief of IKO one in Toronto, Ontario, and he's also a dojo owner and also a proud father of two up-and-coming, I got to make sure I say that right because you have like a lot of kids of two boys who are really working their way up in hockey and whatnot. He is the one, the only Sensei Darren Lenkorn. Welcome, Sensei.
Thank you. Great to be on here. Happy to finally connect. It's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, you've had quite the journey. When we first broke the ice, it's kind of crazy how I feel the way we got into martial arts is you've been at it longer than me. I'm like, so let's make sure I know where I stand, but where you stand because you are a very good sensei, and I'm just still probably a green belt, yellow belt, but who cares? But we both played hockey, so tell me, how did you discover Kyokushin Karate? And here's something else: you're also from Quebec originally, that many people should know.
Yeah, so I was born in Montreal. I grew up in Montreal. I'm an Anglophone, but I'm fluent bilingual. Mm-hmm. My parents separated when I was quite young. I think I was 2 or 2.5, and around 6 or so, my mother met a French Canadian guy from Abitibi, from Nassau. So he was he's a great guy, Jacques. So when we would go up, not only did I do French immersion in school for many years, but when we'd go up to La Salle and Abitibi, no one spoke English. So I really had to practice my French. So I got a leg up even from all the other people who were doing French immersion and practicing my French and so on. But an interesting note, just talking about hockey. So Jacques actually, from Abitibi, 3 brothers and a sister, but he was actually captain of the Quebec Citadels and the Aces and the Junior Canadians in Quebec City, I think in 1960, 61, 62, 63. He was drafted by the Canadians. He played with Jacques Laperrière and Jean Beliveau and those guys all in that farm team, all going to the Canadians. And he decided to go and do his MBA because hockey really, it paid $12,000 a year. You were one injury away. They were working summer jobs. There wasn't really a financial future with hockey, and he was going to university. So he passed up, he was the captain of the team after, I think, Jean Beliveau left, or maybe 2 captains later for that team. And he decided to go. When I was growing up, he always, even as an adult, skate circles around me. I just couldn't go. So that's my experience there. So I played hockey in Montreal. I played, at that time, it was all cities and communities, so everyone played for their local park. So I lived between Snowden and with my mother and kind of lower Westmount. So I played for McDonald Park. There was NDG. There was all these different cities or areas, and we played against each other for city championships. A couple of years I played AAA for the Maroons, which became the Hurons. That was the NDG AAA team. But I was good, but I was never like a top guy. I never had aspirations, but I loved playing hockey. So it was just fun for me. Like, and when high school was over, hockey was done. And and after that, I kind of went through a hard time. I had a difficult relationship with my father. I found out many years later into my 30s that he was bipolar, but it was undiagnosed. So I had a lot of anger, and I spent like from 17, 18, like a year just going crazy, partying, being drunk all the time, getting into stupid street fights, getting my ass kicked, just a lot of anger. And I went to see a counselor with my mom because our relationship was strained over that. And he said, you had purpose when you were in sports. You had self-confidence when you were in sports. Maybe you should get back into sports. And I said, well, I did some Kung Fu a few years ago in old Montreal, and I always liked martial arts. I want to try karate. I want to start something that's a little bit more striking. I like the striking. I did judo at 6, and I liked it, but grappling wasn't really my taste. So I was living there. I had an apartment in Lower Westmount, like the last street where the house shook when the train went by there. But it was a nice area. And so I said, I got to find a place that's close enough that I could walk to in winter that's not more than 10 minutes, or I won't have the discipline to go when it's cold. I'll just go to the bar instead, or I'll stay at home, whatever. And so I checked out a few places. There was one place, Dikari, a Shotokan place, and they also had a really some Olympic judo guys in a judo place, and I went there. It was interesting, but the karate was kind of subdued, And then I went to, there used to be a Taekwondo guy just west on St. Catherine, east on St. Catherine of Atwater on the north side. Maybe it was not Ojang or something like that. The guy ended up moving to Toronto, actually. I met him years later because he had ran a supplier place. And I walked in, and, it was 1988. My hair was dyed blonde, it was the 80s. I was a skinny guy, tall. And believe it or not, the guy looked at me, the master, and he looked at me and said, this is going to be tough. And he wouldn't take me. He thought I was like too soft, too, I don't know, whatever looking, with the style at the time. And it was the best favor anyone ever did to me, because the third place I went to was Shian Andre's dojo, and it was the closest to me. It was right down the street on St. Catherine. And I walked in there, and it was a Thursday. They were sparring. And I watched this Kyokushin class, and it was like nothing I ever saw in these other places. And as much as I was enamored, I was terrified too. Shian Andre was there, and it was a sparring day. They were fighting, and they were really hitting each other. I never saw this before in my life. There was no internet. There was no way to, research one martial art or the other, no whatever. He was just some guy with a sign next to the forum that I would go and watch the hockey game, and I'd always see the school there because he was across the street from the forum. And he said, I'll see you Monday. And I was too scared not to show up Monday. So I showed up Monday, and I signed because I was scared not to say no. And so that was, I think, like November 1988.
Wow. That was when Pat Burns was the head coach of the Montreal.
Yeah. We'd go, and I get, it was $10 for a standing room ticket at the forum. Wow. And you'd go and buy your $10 ticket, and you'd line up maybe an hour ahead of time, because if you went early enough, there was 2 or 3 rows of standing room, and they let you stand one deep. You could stand around the reds, which was amazing, around the whites, around the blues, and depending on how early you showed up with your $10 ticket, you got. So sometimes you'd be right like in the red center ice for $10. So that's what we'd all do. We get our $10 tickets, and we go watch the Habs games.
That's awesome. Who was your favorite player growing up? Because you're a defenseman by trade. So did you have any players that you really enjoyed watching in that golden era?
So I was a defenseman for a long time, and then I got frustrated, and I ended up playing as a winger, and I shouldn't have. I should have stayed. I was much better as a defenseman and a much better player. But I never scored goals. In those days, everyone always say, how many goals you scored? I would say, I'm a defenseman. I get like 1 goal a year, right? And And so I moved up to the wing. But I liked, Larry Robinson, Big D, a guy I look back, he was a big person. Everyone liked Guy Lafleur. But before then, I got to admit, the big reason, and I still, now I wear it because of Belleville, there's a story there. But, when I started playing hockey at 5 in McDonald Park, and I wore number 4, and I wanted to be like Bobby Orr, because that was like, I was 5 years old. It was 73. I just turned 54. So, even though we weren't Bruins fans, everyone was a Bobby Orr fan. And that was like my big inspiration to start in defense and to be that way. But I didn't score like Bobby Orr.
It's one of a once in a lifetime. I mean, also, you also had, there was one guy that was there during your youth that not many people talk about, Rod Langway, who would eventually go to Washington, and he was known as the Secretary of Defense. But they say before he got that nickname, it was Larry Robinson who was teaching him how to be like a good defenseman.
Yeah. So those, it was great times for hockey because you could afford to play the game and you could afford to watch the game. And now that's not the case, right? You got to be you got to be on the upper side of wealthy to afford tickets to go to a game, and you've got to be on the upper side of wealthy to afford to have kids play the game. It's like I don't know what it's like in Montreal, but in Toronto it's like a fortune for kids to play. Like for a 12-year-old kid to play on a AAA hockey team in the GTHL, the team fees are between $7,000 and $11,000 a year.
Whoa!
Just team fees, and then you're paying your gear, your equipment, your extra training, away tournaments, your hotels, and all those things. It's ridiculous money.
They turned it really into a real business. And, as you said, back in the day when they didn't have all this, like it was much more different. Everyone could go to the juniors quicker.
So just back to my story. I joined Sheehan's Andre's dojo.
Yep.
Started in 88, and I moved to Toronto at the end, like August of 97.
Okay.
So I trained there for 10 years, 10 years. And then I continued with him when I first moved here because he was part of our organization for a long time while I was in Toronto.
And so that was the golden era too, because like there's like 2 golden eras they say of Kyokushin. There was the 80s, the 90s, and then like my era, which we'll get to because you have a story about my coach Mohammed, who's gonna come on eventually, whenever that is. But that golden era, the first one, what was it like where everyone was just together and all those tournaments? Like, how good was the quality of the fights from what you remember?
And the quality of the fights were amazing. And, in those days, there wasn't this big split yet. In 88, I think it was Sheehan's first, I joined, and like right away that year, he held his first big tournament, or maybe it was the second one, and it was up at, what was that place?
Claude Robillard?
Yeah, Claude Robillard. And he'd rent that gymnasium, but it would start like he had so many fighters. There'd be junior categories and not just brown and black belt. There'd be a brown belt category and then a black belt category of all the divisions, like in women's and in men's and in juniors and in this weight category. And it would start at like 10 o'clock and finish at 10 o'clock at night because there'd be just so many people coming out and competing. And the level of fights, I mean, Sylvie Coleman was still fighting in those things. Like, we'd watch her go and fight, and she was like a machine. You think Mohammed, like she created Mohammed in his early years, right? And her daughter. So, you're seeing the teachers of the teachers still fight. Yeah. It was really, Reynald was still fighting in the tournament sometimes that you'd go watch, and like in the first few years, Reynald Lamar was still fighting there. And you see him in kind of his heyday doing that. It was a lot.
Him and Daniel Godet too, like she and Dan Godet, who I had on the show, like they had wars, and then apparently Dan was supposed to win one fight against the Japanese, but there was like some, how those fights go. There's with the judging, and apparently if Dan beat that guy, apparently Reynald was going to come out of retirement as like a last hurrah. So it could be like who really has the most lightweight titles of that era.
Yeah, but also in that time, I was training and Sheehan Alain was he would just was kickboxing champion of Canada, and he was boxing a lot. So we'd go to watch. We'd train during the day, and then we'd go out at night and we'd watch Chien Alain and professional boxing matches. We go to the Karate Mania that Alain Jean Thériault's brother would put on, and we'd all go there and our JoJo stuff. And sometimes Chien Pierre fought in those. Chien Pierre was fighting in kickboxing. You ask him about that. I think he fought in one of those Karate Manias in the undercard, and Reynald fought in the undercard on those things too. And then Jean-Yves Thériault would come in and he was the Iceman in those days. He was like the top kickboxer. So you'd have the Kyokushin guys in the early days. Yves Lavigne, who's a big UFC ref, he was the guy reffing all those fights, and that was the beginning of all of this era of things. So it was a really incredible time, and
it really was.
Yeah, and you had all the top Kyokushin fighters of those days. Even Jean Riviere, who was a monster, who came from Chien Pierre's dojo. He had finished 4th place in Japan. He never lost a fight. He lost on weight in the top 4. But he'd show up sometimes. He'd go for a grading, and there'd be Jean Riviere there, and this guy, like, it was, fighting is always hard in Kyokushin, but in those days, I think there was, less appetite for niceties when it came to those things. So it was a bit more, I think, brutal, a little bit more, rough sometimes, not mean, but just maybe, now we're so politically correct, we're soft, things were a little bit different.
Oh, tell me about it. I mean, I kind of missed that. I mean, look, I understand we have to keep the traditions. I can agree with that. But sometimes I like to be a bit of a showman. I'll say that from my side. I like to be a showman. We have some showmen in Kyokushin, and I kind of miss that era. Like sometimes, like that old era, yeah, it was brutal, but it helped elevate the art and the sport category to get competitors in there. Yeah,
I agree. But things have changed. They've evolved necessarily to keep up with the times and how the visions were. I think some things were a little bit brutal. I was scared of Kyokushin. I wasn't a fighter. Like when I fought out in clubs, it was because I was drunk, not because I was a tough guy. I was pretending to be a tough guy. I wasn't ever tough. Inside, I was always scared. I had false bravado. And so my Kyokushin was like, I didn't think I'd last to be Shodan. I was like, I'm going to stick around till my first belt, orange belt. But then, and those days, Chien Andre still followed the belt order. He didn't follow Kyokushin belt order. He started yellow belt, whatever. He followed the regular karate belt order. And then he switched over, I think, in 95 or 90 after Sosai passed.
What was the belt order originally? I'm sorry to interrupt. What was that
it was
belt
the same
order?
As so it was yellow, whatever, yellow, orange, green, blue, I think, yellow, orange, green, blue, brown, black. So when I went up in the belts, that's how it was. But it wasn't Kyokushin. Kyokushin always had its belts like they do now. It was just Chien Andre's organization. And I wonder if he did that so that it would be more commonly accepted with all the other martial arts around, Mm-hmm. And then I think when Sosai passed and Kensho started to bring everyone into line with things, he changed it all. So everyone had to switch their belts to whatever the equivalent things are. Mm. But sometimes it'd be interesting because with the different order of belts, blue now is a much lower belt, but then it was the equivalent of green belt. So sometimes guys would go to championships with blue belts and they'd be fighting, and people would say, how come a beginner belt is so strong? But it was because our belt order wasn't compatible at the time.
So
interesting. So I said, I'm only going to do one belt, and then it'll be too much for me. I can't, it's too tough for me. I won't do it. And then I finished one belt, and like after, it's kind of, you forget about the pain and you say, okay, maybe I'll stick around for one more. And that's how I did it. And it was always one more. I was always, I'm done after the next one because I'm not going to be able. It's too crazy.
Yeah, that's understandable.
34 years later, I'm done after the next one because it's too crazy.
So, you moved to Ontario in 1997, and now the new now my generation is coming up. These are like the Mohammed Chicks, Pasha McKinley. I'm gonna butcher his last name, but he's out west. You know who I'm talking about, Pasha.
Yeah. Well, Pasha. That's almost those guys. Mohammed, Pasha, those guys. They're almost like the last generation, right? Pasha, does he still even fight anymore?
I
You
don't
know, he
even
was,
know. The last
yeah,
time
so those guys were fighting Pasha and Muhammad and Sebastian and all those guys. That was, you know, around 10, 11 years ago. And I had Matt from my dojo, Matt Payne, who was, you know, a solid super heavyweight. He kind of went and beat all those guys. He was the top super heavyweight and went to Japan in 2011 at the World. So that was kind of his area because he'd fight a lot against Pasha, and Damon, who has the Banff dojo, was still fighting then. Now he's retired, and Jason, the guy from who's lighter, but he fought well, but he was kind of light for that category.
Mhm.
There was a few guys around that. I think even Sylvain Lemieux was still fighting, or at the tail end of his fighting, because Matt fought him a couple of times.
There was even Dominic Adam.
Yeah, Dominic was good, but Dominic was a little bit lighter. But he was fighting a lot. So Dominic was a strong fighter. So that was kind of that era. And the up and coming guys were Mohammed. You know, they were just like the coming out. They were the young kids. They were 17, 18, just coming out at the time.
It's very rare too that a 17-year-old gets a knee down in Kyokushin. It's extremely rare. Like, I've spoken with many people about that because, you know, Mohammed got his in 2009 and they said it's just that he had that talent. So what can you tell me from your perspective? What do you think helped, like, what do you think made Mo who he is? Like, with everything included.
I think you know, the Lamar Dojo at that era had a they've always been a big program. I think Chien Reynald, when he was alive, you know, got a lot of people in. I mean, you know, he had a private kickboxing place, and Georges St. Pierre had a key, and he just let himself in and train there. And sometimes Reynald would go in, and a Sunday, like Georges, you know, he would just go train. So you know, they had a lot of experience and a lot of cachet. They were very warm and generous and nice people, but they ran a really strict, a really solid, a really disciplined Kyokushin program. And there wasn't a lot of you know, they're very nice and very warm, but it's exactly that line from that Discovery thing, right? Like, you know, they smile and have breakfast to you one moment, but then they're beating the crap. Like, when it came to fighting and the training, it was very, very, very solid. And they had a lot of people at that time. They had a few people who were Muhammad's level who were fighting in the worlds, and who he was training, and some of the other girls too. So I think he came at the right time in the right place with the right mentors, and all of the people who trained and worked around that level all excelled, who had some talent and who were dedicated. They all worked really hard. Like, they didn't get it because they were just lucky. These were the few, you know, 6, 7, 8 of them who dedicated themselves and just spent all their time training, and then they would go and do CrossFit with Dominic, right? And they would do this and they would do that, everything that they could to better themselves. And I think they motivated each other, and they worked really hard, and they all excelled.
From the stories I've heard was that whenever, like, this is like from another, like, I think, I can't remember their name, but when, like, it was when I first met Mo and they said, "You're training with Mohammed?" I said, "Yeah." They're like, you know, they said that school used to go out and clean tournaments. They said it was between Lamar and Boucherville. Like, Quebec went through those two schools for a period.
Yeah, there were always those two. Chien Andre used to have a lot of fighters back in our day, but as people broke away and did different things, and demographics changed, the Hanbu fighters, they weren't quite as strong. I would say Sebastian was probably the last strong, like, high caliber person to come out of there. You know, different focuses too. And I think Boucherville was always strong. The Lamars were always strong for sure. There were some other dojos, like when the Maritimes were still a part of the organization, they would send up Daniel Godet and those guys. They would bring some good fighters, and they would fight well when they would come from the Maritimes. So there were some good fighters from there as well. And Toronto. Before me, when I was still in Quebec, there was Zibi who was with us. Now he went with Chien Andre when Chien Andre got kicked out. So, but he, you know, he used to come down. There was a Polish dojo just the Polish guys, they called them dojo, and they were always really strong fighters, and they would come to Montreal and win beat those guys in the early 90s, mid 90s. And then probably, around the time that Mohammed kind of broke away from things, my dojo was hitting its stride. And so, I guess, 2000 and mid 2000 and teens, like 14, 15, 16 to when I left, probably I was going down, and all my fighters were the top guys at Sheehan tournament at the time, because Lamar's had some, but not, Mo wasn't there anymore. The shift had happened, and so on.
He was so burned out. I mean, like when he went to go fight in 2015 in November, like, I mean, if you look at it, like, it wasn't like, yeah, he lost to Antonio, but it wasn't like a bad loss. But if you watch Mo's body language, like, I mean, it's like
he wasn't himself. I was there. I was ringside for him.
He wasn't himself.
I was ringside at the World Championships, coaching him at the fight. I mean, then you could have up to eight coaches. So while I wasn't there for him, I was actually there. There was a couple of other guys. One from out west was at Sheehan's dojo and somewhere else. So I was there coaching people from Montreal and with the team. So I was there, like, amongst the 8 people for his fight. And it was a lucky kick, but he looked out of step. Like, he just didn't look like he usually did. He didn't look like he did when he beat Nico. I was there when he fought Nico Stoyan in LA. And that was, I would say, where Muhammad peaked. Like, he looked his best at that tournament to me. He peaked at that tournament. He did not look in the same form. He looked good, but he wasn't the same Muhammad in LA this year at the World Championships.
There was so much going on. I mean, with karate and other stuff too with his life, but. And, I just think with all the accolades he had, I mean, it gets to you. I mean, like, I like to equate it to, I'm going to be very careful when I use the analogy here, because, everyone, has an opinion, but I mean, like, it's kind of like, where George got burned out, when after the Hendricks fight. That's how I equate Mohammed's 2015, like, last, like, Japan tournament. He was just that burned out. And it's tough being like the face of North America. And then, that comes with it, like, the prestige, people want to get in close with you. They want to get you into this tournament. They want to get you into this organization. They want everything from you. And, he just wanted to take he wanted a hiatus. Like, I can't blame him.
Yeah. I think any athlete who's at the peak can only maintain the peak for a certain period, and they need time to recharge. And I don't know what his training was like. I don't know what the experience was like. I know a little bit, but I didn't talk to him about personal matters. We would see each other a lot, and we would have fun, but I never really talked to him about his personal life much. So I don't know what it was like behind the doors, so to speak. But I know from a lot of fighters and even my guys, like, they go on this thing and they push themselves and they get to the highest level, and maybe they achieve what they expected, or they didn't achieve what they expected. And then they have to deal with the emotional thing and the physical piece, right? You can't maintain peak performance indefinitely. Even Olympic athletes, every athlete builds up to a crescendo, and then they kind of, their body needs to recharge. I think even hockey players, like, some of them can maintain that level, but they're not maintaining a level of 100%. They're maintaining a season level of 80% or 70% to run a whole season versus doing 110%. And when you're fighting, you can't go 80%. You have to be at that peak of 110%. So it's a kind of a different path, and it takes a big toll emotionally, physically. It's hard. And Kyokushin, people don't realize, they say, okay, no hit punches or whatever, but it's brutally hard on your body, and back in my days, like, I got ribs broken at green belt. When I did my brown belt grading, I was out 2 years. I had to have surgery on my arm because it dislodged the nerve in my elbow, and I had to have, like, a pitcher's elbow. When I did my brown belt, Sheehan had the and Max was there as well. Our brown belt grading, our first Q grading. It was like the instructor's seminar for Eastern Canada. So we had every teacher, head of dojo from all the dojos from the Maritimes up here, and that's who we fought. And they just beat the crap out of us for 10 rounds or 12 rounds. Like, it was brutal. It was much worse. Like, that was probably one of my worst beatings ever. way worse than even my Shodan grading. But to put in perspective, Shodan, when Sheehan was running Shodan, I think I did mine in 96 because I had to wait. I had to have surgery on my elbow after my brown belt. We had so many people grading between him because the Lamars, everyone would come to one place. There were 54 people grading for Shodan. And it was like he rented a gym and there was 8 tatami and it was the first day and you had to draw lots. And I remember I drew 1. So I got to go first in the tatamis and get it over with. And I remember poor Max was like 52 and he had to wait 2 hours watching everyone go through this. And you're almost shaking because you're cooled down. You're waiting for 2 hours to do your fights. It was a crazy thing.
So we take it to 1996. Let's put it back into hockey. So 1995-96 to me, when it comes to 90s hockey history, it's a very significant year if you're a Habs fan, because 1995, the year in a whole. So 1995, the lockout shortened year. That many people seem to forget about. The lockout shortened 1995 season. Montreal misses the playoffs for the first time in 24 years. It's like unheard of. Then, 1995 comes. There's concerns, like with the whole debacle with like the Mike Keane not wanting to speak French, and then it was misconstrued. Then there was a referendum year. Patrick was kind of on his way out. What do you think like now? And then it all like just exploded in December 2nd. But if cooler heads prevailed, how do you think it should have happened? Because there's a second part to this question. If they traded Patrick for Owen Nolan, which is the rumor, it's been confirmed in the auto bio, how do you think Montreal would have fared for the rest of the 90s?
I don't know. I think Mario Tremblay was the wrong guy at the wrong time. Maybe he represented, at the time I remember they were all excited. Oh, the old generation, the Habs who know how to win, all these Hall of Famers are coming in. But I go back to my experience of realizing after that, who was like the worst coach ever in the NHL and who was the best player, arguably, or one of the top players. Like Gretzky was a horrible coach in Arizona. He was horrible. That team was awful and he couldn't coach anything. And yet he's the great one, right? And look at most coaches are not Hall of Famers. They're guys who were, backbenchers. Maybe they never made the show. Maybe they only played a little bit. Maybe they were tough guys. Pat Burns kind of guys or whatever, but they had a vision for the game and they could see the game. So, it's a whole different thing, coaching and being able to be the top performer. And very few people can do both. You don't often see that. So those guys, they were the wrong people. And they, they had this big thing, like, we're not going to take any guff, even from the superstars, from Patrick Roy and all this stuff. And so they made their own ego more important than the most important player on the team. Yeah, he was getting lit up. Just pull him, put the other guy in, give him a break, save him some shame. He just won us our only cup, a couple of years back, and he stood on his head. They won out of 14 wins, 11 were overtime wins. Mm-hmm. They were him stealing the show because it was a good team, but it wasn't an all-star team, that 93 team. Right? They had a lot of really good players. They had a ton of heart, and they had a guy who was winning them a cup in that. Like, he won that cup. So, maybe you got Owen Nolan, but if you had the same old guards in there, how would they have treated him? How would the egos be? It wasn't a talent thing. It was an organizational thing. The culture had shifted, and these people were, Jacques Demers was a good coach. Maybe they let him go because of a bunch of reasons, but he motivated a team of haphazard, above average talent guys and a fantastic Hall of Famer goalie into winning a cup. And so, that was a lot more than any of the guys that came after for 10 years. I just think it was a bad comedy of errors of bad coaching and bad organization, and not really understanding how to develop people and how to treat the important people in your puzzle and those things. So yeah, maybe Owen Nolan would have made a difference. Maybe the team would have been different, but they could have crushed him too. Like, they crushed Patrick Roy. They crushed him.
It really did. I mean, and then they also did a panic move to make Turgeon the captain, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great player, but Vincent Damphousse should have been the obvious choice, but he got the captaincy too little too late.
Yeah. And a lot of those things were bizarre. There's a lot of head scratchers, you know. Even Keane, like Mike Keane, you know, should he have been captain? That was a bizarre choice, right? That was right after. I don't know. There's just, you know, journeyman. Yeah, okay. Uh, I'm not really sure. Like, it's kind of like the argument now of saying, should Gallagher be captain? Well, Gallagher is the heart and soul on the ice, but who's the heart and soul in the dressing room? Like, who's leading the team? If that's him, that's fine. But if it's not, just because he plays a great game with a lot of heart on the ice doesn't necessarily mean he's the captain. Captain doesn't mean to be the guy who, yes, you show what you're doing on the ice and your emotions are there, but it's got to be the one that gets the team going and the emotions of everyone working in the room. Downpoos was that guy, for sure.
I definitely agree. And, you know, but now with with the current situation, I mean, everyone's thinking, do they retool? Do they rebuild?
Hey, Shane Wright to Montreal.
Paying for Shane.
Shane. Now, my older boy's in 03, right? So he played with Shane Wright because he played up. He's in 04. He played up with the 03s. He played with Brendan Hoffman, who's gone to the Rangers. I know Brendan's dad. I was talking to him the other day on that Don Mills Flyers team on the Patriots. Forberg plays there. So we know a lot of the guys from that group. Shane Wright's the real deal. I want Montreal to tank the whole year and win the Shane Wright lottery because it's like having Crosby. That's what we need.
He's kind of like a Bergeron when I look at him. And I do agree with you. I think it's time to really rebuild. I think it's time to really have that conversation with Carey Price to say, listen, it's time. We're moving in it. I think, like, if I'm Jeff Gorton, because let's just all be real here. Like, I've spoken with Habs fans who think the GM is the real – Gorton's the real boss, okay? The GM is just there to talk to the media. But I think Gorton's going to have that conversation with Carey and say, we're doing a rebuild. Do you want to stay here or not? And I think Carey if you look at Carey, he doesn't even want to be here anymore. I think he just wants to move on.
Yeah. I think he wants to go to Seattle, right? He was ready to go, not because he didn't want the Habs. I think he came off a good way, but it's close to home for him. You know, it's closer to his family. Now maybe he doesn't want to go because they're not, you know, showing up as well. I don't know that they're any closer to a cup than we are. But yeah, he probably would want to go to a contender, like somewhere he can go and have a dance on in a rebuild. But I think you're right. Let him decide, right? If he commits to staying, Carey will have the right mind frame to say, I'm staying here and this is what I want to do. But don't make him stay here if he doesn't want to be part of a rebuild. Trade him and get some good assets because you're going to get the Carey that, you know, isn't happy and isn't focused versus the Carey that was dialed in like we just had in the last playoff run. And we need the Carey that's dialed in. The guy's got to want to be here. And you can still get a lot for him, arguably. Like, he's still Carey Price, right? He's got a lot to give, and he can lead a team to a cup.
I definitely agree. I think if your name – I always say this. If your name is not Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, maybe Josh Anderson, like those three, you're tradable. Like, you're out of here, basically. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. And even Caden Gooley is going to be good. He's looking really good. Romanov's clearing up a little bit and making less errors. He's starting to you know, he hasn't lived up to the guy he has, but Montreal has a bad habit of making people, you know, come in out of nowhere and have to be the guy. Even PK, when he came, you know, he developed for a few years in the OHL. He developed for a few years, and well, now it was Hamilton, right? Because it wasn't Laval at the time.
Yeah, it was Belleville.
Belleville. Well, Belleville. He played for the Belleville Bulls, but then he played in Hamilton, right? For the Bulldogs, or the under team, the HL team used to be there, right? They moved it. So they moved to Laval. So he played for the HL team. He had some time to develop, and even his first season, he came up and he had played a little bit. They eased him in. And so he became the player that he could be. But it seems since then they've been rushing because they've been, you know, we got to find the next one. We're missing something, and rushing these guys in. And it hasn't really worked well.
It really hasn't.
He had a great run, but, you know, he's too young too soon. Give him some time.
I just leave him in Laval. Even Norlinder, too. Norlinder is supposedly one of their best defensive prospects for the power play. He's languishing on the third pair. Then they put him back in Laval, and now his agent says he's going to go back to Sweden where he could get real. it's a big mess. Like, they really need to figure out, like, how are they developing their young players? And it's like, and that's where, like, you know, like, it's like, I met Trevor Timmons, and, you know, this is 17-year-old me when I was unfiltered. I didn't care. Like, I went up to him and I said to him, "You're terrible at scouting." Like, I said it into his face, and he took it well. He probably saw me as like a rabid 17-year-old fan, but I said to him, "You're absolutely terrible." I'm like, "You chose LeBlanc over Marcus Johansson or like some other guy at the time, Chris Kreider." Yeah, and he was like, "It's not an exact science." That's what he says. That's his argument.
And I can tell you from my insight. So I'm through all the hockey stuff. I'm actually really good friends with the Subban family. I go to their family barbecue every year. In 2016, I went with the Subbans to the Player Awards when he won the Norris the year before, and then that year he was up for the the trophy for all of his humanitarian work.
Yeah.
And so I went to Vegas. I was actually somewhere else. I was working on a contract somewhere, and his coach growing up, who coached him all through minor hockey and is kind of his mentor, mentors my kids and ended up being still a really personal friend. And he called me up and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Well, I'm in Vegas with PK for the awards. Come join us." So I'm like, okay. So I fly in the plane to Vegas, and it's the night before the awards, and I go to the hotel, the Encore, and I'm sitting. I go meet the coach Chico, Martin Ross, amazing guy, amazing coach. He coached PK. He coached a lot of guys like Thomas Stewart came through his thing. I'm trying to Trevor Daly. Trev's brother's kid played with my boys, so I know Trev too. I went to them, partied with them when he brought the cup in and hung out with them. Trevor Daly went through his thing. A lot of guys, 8 or 9 guys who all made the NHL in the last 15 years have gone up through this hockey school. So we get to the hotel. This is a brief story, but it's a fun story. And I'm meeting him and PK, and there's some guys, Anson Carter's there, and Sheldon Soure's there, and some other people, and I'm just having a drink at the bar at the hotel. And then PK says, "Oh, we're going to go to this club at Caesars." I said, "All right, sounds great." And so we all get in this limo and we go out to this club or whatever. And as we're about to go in, he turns to us and says, "Hope you don't mind. Sid's here with the cup, so we're going to go hang out with him." And Pittsburgh had just won their first back-to-back cups, 2016. And so we go into this private booth in like the hottest club, Omnia in Caesar's Palace. And in this booth in the middle of the dance floor is the Stanley Cup and a big bucket full of champagne and Sid Crosby and a few other people. And that was our night. And we hung out. I have pictures, like we hung out with Sid in the cup all this night, partying in this thing. The cup goes to bed at midnight. The handlers took it out and we partied all night. And then the next day, we hung out at the pool, and Connor McDavid was in the pool hanging out, was swimming with us and stuff. And I was actually at breakfast with PK's dad, and he was saying PK is getting traded. Montreal doesn't want him around anymore. Bergevin doesn't like him. Pacioretty wants him out of the room because they conflict all the times, and they thought he was going to New York at the time. And then he gets traded. So they knew he was going, and they had endemic issues in the management for sure. And they couldn't deal with his personality. PK's the nicest guy. Like he's not egotistical. He's confident, but he's not egotistical. He gives his heart and soul for everything. And he loved Montreal, and I think they shouldn't have moved him. Yes, Weber is a great guy and a good player, but I'm not sure that we would have done any better or any worse. But PK gave a lot more to the city and rallied the fans and around the cause, in my opinion.
He brought you out of your seat, kind of like Kovalev did. I mean, like when Alexei Kovalev left Montreal, I was pretty angry. And I mean, I say that very, like, I mean, he should have been the captain after Koivu. And even to a degree after the Centennial, because when they were giving Kovalev the captaincy, when Koivu was hurt, the players jived with Alex more because Alex was a different voice and mentality. And I just think what they should have done is told Saku, like, look, just sit this year out until the playoffs, and then come back, less pressure for you or something like that. But yeah.
I agree. Anyway. So I think the issues with Montreal, hopefully the change in management and style is going to be a real change. I think Jeff Molson has too much say, and he sticks his nose too much into things as an owner as well. I think there's some influence there. He's got to, let his new guys do something and take his nose out of things a bit too. I think Bergevin should have gone like 4 years ago. 3 years ago. I don't think he's done a great job, but they've done a horrible job drafting. They have some prospects, but look at the misses. Like, the misses have been huge.
Do I need to say Jesperi Kotkaniemi over Brady Tkachuk?
Yeah, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you do that? Okay, you have a needed center, but how can you not take,
Galchenyuk. I thought Galchenyuk was going to be Kopitar for the Habs. I'm like, yes, they're getting Anze for the Habs finally.
Yeah. But Galchenyuk and Gallagher were drafted in the same draft, and look at where they are. So I think that's a big issue. Yeah,
it's tough. They gotta just revamp the whole scouting. They gotta get this like defensive mentality out and get guys that know how to work with young players. They have to just revamp everything in the front office. And then, as I said, if your name isn't Nick Suzuki or Cole Caulfield or Josh Anderson, out.
Yeah, and even I think so. Also through Caleb played a couple of years ago for his major midget AAA team, and one of the players on the team is Caden Primo's uncle, the dad. He actually played 8 years for the Philadelphia Flyers. He's married to Keith Primo's sister. So Caden Primo is the real deal in net, but you got to let him develop too. Goalies need time. He could be is he number one? I don't know, but he's going to be a solid goalie. He's going to be really good. But with what's going on now, you got to just let him sit down in the HL and get experience, gain confidence, or you're going to lose that prospect too.
I just think you should never pay goalies more than 10 mil, like Carey's goal contract. Like, I think the best number for a goalie is, if we'll take a sample, is Igor Shesterkin on the Rangers. He's making 5.5 mil. I think goalies should make max 5.5 to 6. It's just me, because I think the real players you need to build around are always a number one center or a puck moving defenseman.
Right. But Montreal's always tried to build around a goalie. They've tried to do that with since Patrick Roy. They try and build around that, and they've been looking for the replacement of Roy. Arguably, Price could have been that, but they didn't get all the rest of the pieces to get that, and the organization isn't the same. Back in the day, Sarah Savard did a better job building things there. People didn't understand, but now looking back, he was the last good GM of the team.
I would also say Andre Savard too, that came in after Réjean Wool, because there was that little period. He kind of stopped the internal bleeding before Bob came in, because there's two phases of Bob Gainey. There was the first phase where everyone was happy, but then after, when he tragically lost his daughter, rest in peace, Laura Gainey, he was never the same. Like,
no, and that was, it was unfortunate, but they should have changed, and they should have made a change then.
Yeah, they should have just said family comes first. Like, they should have said, your family comes first. Just we'll find a replacement. But Andre Savard was a good one. I mean, he fixed the mistakes of Réjean Wool in such a fast period. Like, I mean, he got rid of Trevor Linden. Like Trevor Linden. Like, when people look at Trevor Linden in a Habs jersey, I've never met one fan that said positively, "Yeah, I liked it when Trevor Linden played for Montreal. He wanted out more than he wanted to be here."
Yeah, and he never really shined. It wasn't his place. It wasn't the fit. A name is a name. A player can do really well, but if they're not psyched and they're not ready to come in and they really don't want to be here, what are they going to really do? It's like when Lindros got drafted to Quebec. Yes, okay, it's Lindros, but he said he didn't want to go there, and you drafted him anyway. What did you expect? Like, you should have drafted the number 2 guy and let him go. Yes, you're passing up on Lindros, but he wasn't going to play for you.
No, exactly.
Right, like, you can't force someone to be happy somewhere if they're not.
It's so true. And I mean, like, and it's like, but then after that, he made some good moves. Like, he brought in, he traded Eric Weinrich for Patrick Travers. I think Andre Savard's best moves were trading Trevor Linden and Zubris for Zednik, Bulis, and a first-round pick at the time, because Zednik became Saku's trigger man. And then I would also say bringing in Yannick Perreault.
Yes, because he was like amazing at face-offs. Like, he was just fantastic on that face-off. He was really, really strong.
It was really good too. I mean, then you had Patrice Brisebois who was there, but then he helped bring up Andre Markov. Patrick. When it comes to like former players whose brands have aged really well, I think people appreciate Patrice more than before because they said, "Oh, he's got that contract and he's not living up." But over time, it's like Brisebois has become like a great ambassador for the team over time.
He's been a great ambassador, but we called him Breeze by, right? Like he was not a consistent defenseman. He really struggled a lot with his game, and sometimes he would look incredible, and other times he would just look lost out there, and people would go by. So he was a real hit and miss kind of D. And I think it was consistency in the game, right? He just couldn't find consistency enough. So people didn't know which Brisebois you'd get. Would you get the Brisebois that could skate down and look amazing, or would you get the Brisebois that people would joke by because they just breeze by him and he just like he wasn't there?
And then you have Andre Markov who came in. It's just so tragic, like I think Andre Markov could have been nominated for a Norris if he didn't have all those health issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and we should have taken him back. Like, I don't know why we wouldn't. We gave contracts to other people for the same money that didn't mean anything. Like, why wouldn't we have taken Markov and kept him for another year?
It's like the same thing with Kovalev. I mean, like there's this one guy at my gym like that I always like argue with, like because he says, oh well, Alex was trying to leverage more from the team. He's not bigger than the team. I said, I'm like, he's a star. He takes people out of their seats. You give him that extra 500 to $1 million if it keeps the fans coming because fans love him. Same with Markov.
Yeah, people like those people, and that's the same thing with PK, right? Like the fans loved him, the city loved him. So was it really like was it their need? The conflict was that the management and Patches didn't like him, and at the end of the day, was that really worth moving and shaking those things up?
Pacioretty was the worst captain. I mean, I think he's Pacioretty. They gave him it's like they gave him the key to fail. It's like, here, it's like, we know this is going to be tough for you. Now go out and like fail. And then
he wasn't a leader, right? Like he had conflicts in the room. He was a good player. I like Pacioretty as a player. He was exciting to watch. He just wasn't a guy to be put in lead, and he shouldn't have been dictating who he liked and he didn't like in the room. He didn't have enough. He's not Crosby, right? Like, you don't need to keep him happy at all costs.
I mean, I think the captain should have been Plekanec. It should have been between Plekanec and Markov, those two, because they've been long tenured. They might not say much, but they get the job done. So it should have been between those two. But I mean, look, it is what it is. We could say shoulda, coulda, woulda, but which we have been doing. But at the end of the day, I'm hopeful. I think they're going to finally just say, look, we're tearing it down. We know you're going to hate it. There's going to be some pain for 3 to 5, maybe 6 years. But by the 6th year, we'll get it right finally. And then you'll get your team you want. So
I think we should, just put in our let our prospects just develop and have fun this year. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter if we don't win another game and get Shane right.
I totally agree. Pardon, what were you going to say?
No, I think that's really, let them have fun. Don't put a lot of pressure. Say, listen, guys, we're giving you shots to play up here, not because we expect you to do great things, but just to give you the experience because we're going to rebuild and we're going to go after Shane Wright. So go out, have fun. We're not going to judge you for your mistakes. This is all about just getting experience so we can see what we end up with at the draft upcoming, and then we can rebuild and base that from there. And in the meantime, you're getting a few NHL games under your belt for some extra experience.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you this because speaking of like juniors, knowing the prospects, this is a topic that's come across my plate, and I want to get your thoughts on it. A lot of kids are now foregoing the major junior route and they're choosing an NCAA route by going to prep school. What do you think has led to that trend? Because before the OHL, the WHL, kids were like trying to get any way to get into there, but now it's changing.
So I think it's part of the business change too. People are looking for more paths to be able to get pro and catch eyes. Hockey is a business. So going back to, we were talking offline before that, I don't know what it's like outside of Toronto, but Toronto is crazy. So to play AAA hockey for a 10-year-old, the fees, as I was saying when we were offline, are between $7,000 and $11,000 a year just for your team fees. The coaches of those teams are being paid between $15,000 and $25,000 to coach like Pee Wee and Adam AAA teams on a year. Like, and then they're sending the kids, you got to come to my camps, you got to do this. So they're making, 30, 40,000 a year plus whatever they're doing, just coaching like an Adam AAA team. Like the business is nuts, and it's all underground. The teams are chosen before the tryouts happen. They're scouting people. There's backdoor stuff. Sometimes kids are getting spots on a team because they're giving paper bags of $5,000 of cash. I know, another guy sponsored a team. He did a $30,000 sponsorship, and he got his kid on a team. Like, it's just crazy, some of the stuff that's going on and the money that's happening. So first of all, we're no longer in Canada. The big problem with Canadian hockey is we are no longer fostering the best of talent. It's not affordable for the best of talent. We're not getting the Maurice Richards who grew up very poor but were so good that they were able to rise to the top. We're fostering the best of the wealthy families who can pay. We're manufacturing hockey players versus fostering talent. And what's coming out, yes, the occasional Shane Wright comes out and so on, but most of the guys coming out, it's because they've been skating, 10 or 12 of, all year round. They're going to camps. They're on the ice 6-7 times a year. Their parents are paying $20,000 a year for all their hockey development and progress. And we're manufacturing talent. But we're not necessarily finding the raw talent of someone who comes from an underprivileged or has natural ability or whatever, because they could never afford the game. They couldn't play it. They couldn't make it. They couldn't even get on, play house league. The cost is prohibitive. So you're seeing a shift where the U.S. system and how the developing is producing more consistent talent. And they've risen up to almost be stronger in many ways in that development and up to junior than Canada. And people are looking at that system, and a lot of it is coming out of these prep schools and the school system where people aren't playing, on these high-end teams. They're paying that money, but they're paying it for an educational experience along with hockey. And I think people are taking note, saying what's going on there. And then a lot of Canadians who necessarily can't afford or can't find their way on the spot or don't have the political acumen to get onto these elite spots because the coaches often have very big egos here and so on. They're saying, well, maybe I'll put my kid in a prep school and I'll do this. There's a huge, prep schools are coming out of the woodwork in Ontario. I don't know if it's the same in Quebec, but, my son was offered a free ride 2 years ago to just this COVID hit. So we didn't went, it's a $60,000 to a prep school, pay us $20,000 and you'll be the starting goalie and come play, your grade 12 for us. There's these all 5 or 6 prep schools that have started up in the last few years, all around hockey and school-based. And it's a lot of money too. You're still paying $40,000, $30,000 a year to go the prep school route. But I guess the difference is you're getting, your education is being fortified.
It's so true. And I mean, and in Quebec, just to bring it to Quebec, here's what's happening. So I'm going to use another case study example. You've heard of Joseph Valeno, right? The exceptional talent. I don't know if you follow the Quebec. Okay. So Joe Valeno got that exceptional talent like John Tavares did in others. Yeah. And he made it into the St. John Sea Dogs. And I know his cousins, Anthony and Michael, because I played ball hockey with them. And Mike Bonacountry, who played pro hockey in France and also in the BCHL, runs next level hockey in Quebec. It's it's a very good private.
I get emails from those guys. I get invitations for stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a small world. So, anyways, Joe Valeno's their cousin, and Joe could have chosen the prep school route, but because he was so good, and this is the thing with the Quebec League, if you get top 6 minutes, you get noticed by NHL scouts. But if you're in the bottom, if you're a third liner, even though you get 50 goals or 100 points, they don't look at you because they want to make sure you're on the top 2 lines. That's the problem with the QMJHL. So Quebec is still nicely putting it a bit behind, whereas Ontario's trying to catch on to the U.S. But once Quebec catches on, they're trying to figure out how do we foster talent in Quebec. Well, figure out a way to get the prep schools in there. Even if it's a French prep school, just get it in there, encourage French immersion, and then basically help those Quebec students, that go to the prep school route, in Ontario, to get an NCAA scholarship, or maybe even also invest in more Canadian university hockey to stand with the NCAA. That's another idea, maybe.
Yeah, U Sports though is different, right? Because in the way it happens anyway in the OHL is that a standard OHL contract is that for every year that you play, they give you 1 year of university paid for at the value of whatever the local university of the OHL team is. So if you play 4 years in the OHL, you can arguably have your 3 or 4 years of university covered in most Canadian places. Maybe not U of T if you're playing in Sudbury, the local university is not going to be U of T rates. But still, you're getting a lot of money. So U Sports, most of the teams at Canadian universities are OHL guys who are done playing hockey, and they're going. So most of the Canadian universities have OHL. Most of the guys are OHL hockey players that are done, and now you're using their OHL funds and playing hockey there. So it's not easy to get on a university team, but no one's scouting a university team because it's all the guys that didn't make it and didn't get scouted. And I think we need a shift maybe to say, maybe we should be scouting it. But the problem also is that, for NHL anyway, to scout those things, because they could be prospects. They could have been a third liner that got 50 goals and just got overlooked and could be great. And now they're playing, at who knows where. They're playing at Dalhousie, or they're playing, McGill, or playing whatever they're playing. The other thing that's funny is that my younger boy once had a practice, and right after all these guys came in, they were wearing overalls and stuff, and then they got on the ice. I was waiting for my son to come off, and I couldn't believe the hockey these guys were playing. And I leaned over and I spoke to one of the guys on the bench, and it was the Elevator Repair Union hockey team, and they were all OHL guys. Like, there wasn't a single guy on the ice that hadn't played in the OHL. And it was the union team, because they all became, tradesmen after their OHL day. And like, it was some of the best hockey I saw at some, rink in the middle of nowhere, just guys playing pickup, but they were all guys who played at the highest levels, and now they're doing stuff afterwards.
Oh man, it's just crazy, all that talent that gets overlooked, as you said, fostering talent. So we need to do a better, I think just Canada as a whole needs to do a better job of fostering that talent and helping, eliminate who has the most money, but money, skills pay the bills, as they say. But I think there needs to kind of be that hybrid model, like where, I don't know, like Hockey Canada has to really look at itself in the mirror based on the last World Juniors. I mean, to lose to the US on home soil, like that was.
But we've got to first find a way to make the game. I understand maintaining ice rinks is expensive and gear is expensive, but the expenses aren't just limited to that. The cost of all the extra training, now here, if you're not doing all this extra training, all this extra stuff, you're almost left behind. But who can afford $4,000 or $5,000 or more of like just summer training and then all the extras in the year? Why are we paying coaches $20,000 to coach 9-year-old? They shouldn't get paid, or they should get a per diem. When I played hockey, you'd all show up on one day and you'd all skate, and then they divide you in the rink based on your skills. So, A, B, C, and you'd move back and forth. The next day they'd go back and they'd tweak it here and there. So it was transparent who was trying out for things. But there's no tryouts anymore. You show up at the tryouts, the teams are chosen. They've already been trying out and doing all this stuff, and they're not meant to. There's tampering laws, but really you get your wrist slapped for being caught, not for doing it. The whole system is a business, and the cost of it and the way the business is run is not fostering the best of talent. It's fostering the best of those who can afford to create talent.
That's the problem.
And we're getting left behind by the Europeans and by the U.S. system.
I mean, Sweden and Finland are really catching up. I mean, Russia. Yeah. Russia's an interesting story.
Yeah, and Germany, like some of the other countries where they were never powerhouses, right? And look how successful they've been recently. There's our system is broken, and as long as it's made the focus is around egos and money, and not about what we can really do to develop talent and find the best kid, it's going to continue to slide.
It's a very dangerous trajectory, and then eventually, Canada will be like a afterthought. Like Rome, it's going to collapse like Rome. If every great empire collapses, I mean, they should have taken note of that when they lost to the U.S. in 2010 in the Saskatoon after the 5 straight years of gold.
Yeah. I completely see it. I completely agree with that. So it's very hard, and even with my kids, my son's. My older boy's a good goalie. Is he the best goalie out there? No, there's guys who I've seen who say, wow, that guy's really good. So I'm not going to say that. But often he's been passed over because of connections, because of cash donations, because of a lot of stuff. Times where he's won and other people have been passed over, and the decisions are not always done in the best interests of the game or the talent. It's often done in the best interest of who's making the money and who's paying the money. And there's stories of that all over the place.
Oh, it's nuts. Taking it back to karate now, because we could go on to a rabbit hole for this.
Yeah,
so, I mean, so now 2020 has been a very tough year for every dojo. It doesn't matter what association because of COVID and whatnot. Now we're finally reopened. So what do you hope is going to happen for your dojo and 2022? Like, what do you see the future holding for yourself?
So we've rebounded back really well. Scary year. I've always had a little bit of a different dynamic here than from Quebec, So the issues that plagued Chien Andre and then caused him to be kind of ushered out of our organization. I don't have those issues here. We the cost of training in martial arts is more expensive, so I can charge what I need to support a dojo. Where in Quebec you're fighting over pennies all the time. It's very hard. You can't charge as much because the overhead is less. People don't expect it, and it's a different thing. So I like this summer I run kids camps, and I had 40 kids a week for 9 weeks, and that completely kind of made me whole for my for the time that was closed. I never had so many kids in my kid karate camps, and all of my classes are full now. I have to add classes. I have grading on Saturday. I have 61 kids. I'm grading next week. So it's really good. It's lucky for me. I want to grow though. I want to build my organization. I feel I'm a branch chief. I have my dojo, but I need to find some students now and usher my guys and, hey, go, why don't let's open up a satellite place. I'll support you. I want to grow the organization in Ontario because it's not really that big here. And I want to find, I have a place in Vaughan. And I just couldn't get the instructor situation sorted out, and I couldn't make it out from where I live. I'm the opposite side of the city, and I'm going to my kids' hockey. So I need to find, get my guys organized. But I want to grow. I want to do that. I want to start having some tournaments. We have some challenges in Ontario having tournaments because of regulations, and I want to sort that out. Being our organization is, I think, across all of the provinces, the one that's most represented in Canada and has been. So that gives us some ability to get the governance that we need to in Ontario and the systems to be able to get sanctioned to have tournaments. And I'd like to do that. I'd like to hold tournaments here and grow. It's time now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really my focus. I want to build the organization.
I really hope that, like, what I'm hoping too because I think now with the use of technology, being because you're with IKO, and I mean, I'm hoping eventually, like, maybe some, like some positives happen where maybe IKO slowly starts allowing other orgs like to come in just to see what's going, just to see what they're like. So then that way we can all learn from each other. I don't know. It's up to the brass up there. Yeah. I'm not there. So, but it's just an idea.
The thing and not to get into the politics.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
But when Sosai was alive, because if you believe what our lineage is correct, which from everything I know, I strongly believe it is. When Masayama was alive and people kind of wanted to break away, he didn't recognize them because they were no longer Kyokushin. So, because we're kind of the original direct lineage, people break, and this is a very Japanese way of thinking and doing things, right? You kind of left, so you're not us anymore. If you want to apologize and ask to come back and rejoin the fold, I don't know if the door is open or not. But so the difficulty of having other organizations come in and join is that, they kind of left, and so they're not us anymore. And that's where the barrier for those things are. And there's a lot of, face and posturing in Japanese culture and how that all works. And so I think that's it would be nice, but it's a very difficult thing. So I don't know if there'll be collaboration. I'm comfortable where I am. I like my organization. I like the people and knowing that that there's those restrictions doesn't affect me. so much. It didn't. So that's why I've always remained here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm in a unique situation in Toronto too, where, you know, I have a good dojo that runs and I have good things. But yeah, so I don't know that that's ever going to be overcome. Maybe, but I think it's a difficult thing, you know, for organizational ways. And I understand where we come from. You know, when you stay in an organization, you kind of say, well, I accept my rules and my way, and so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, you guys are doing great, especially I respect anyone that's continuing to do it. I mean, the fact that like you're representing Ontario and Ontario's so big, so there's so much room for like, you know, growing and whatnot. And then, I mean, then you have like Saskatchewan, Manitoba. I mean, I'm sure there's like delegates there. And then you have Alberta where your main headquarters is. So it's pretty interesting to see like what's going to happen and how Zoom is utilized. And you feel Zoom has helped bring everybody closer like than before?
Yeah, I think Zoom has helped. I think too, you know, there's a changing of the guard within our organization. So for many years, there were only two Shihan that kind of ran Canada and had all of these dojos, and they kept, you know, I don't think it was wrong, but they kept kind of a tight rein. They were very reluctant to share any of the I guess the administration and that piece. And I think that created issues, you know. Had, you know, the Lamars and Pierre and some others left before, had they been allowed to become branch chiefs instead of having to be kept the way they were, maybe they would have stayed because they would have been able to manage their own system and their own stuff. You know, a lot of that happened because they weren't able to have the say that they wanted to directly, and they had to go through channels. And even out west, you know, Shan Stewart is starting to move towards that as well, realizing, okay, I'm older, and if I want this to grow, I have to let people sprout up. So I think, you know, now where we've gone from two branch chiefs, you know, there's one out west, there's one in Quebec, there's two in Ontario, and then there's one out west. So now we've gone from 2 to 5. And while maybe the Quebec organization is not as expansive as it ever was, we have more representation across the country, and we have a good ability to build on that. And you know, we're in more provinces and more consistently represented than any other group. Still, that could change, who knows? But for now, that's worked well. So I think there's good opportunity for the new generation. You know, Sensei Johnny in New Brunswick, I've known for a long time. He's doing great things. You know, Bernard, who's in Kitchener, I've known also for forever. So I think it's nice to have the new guard come in and kind of help build these things now. It's time for the fresh blood and the new people to see what their vision is for our organization in Canada.
Awesome. That's amazing. And so I guess, you know, we'll conclude it here because, you know, the future's bright. It doesn't matter where you are. You want to end it on a positive note. As long as you're doing Kyokushin in my books, you're cool. It doesn't matter. Sensei, where can people connect with you if they're in Ontario, if they want to take up martial arts?
So Toronto Kyokushin, www.torontokyokushin.com. Very easy to find me. If you Google Kyokushin in Toronto, it comes up on the first label, and you can call us. We have a full-time dojo. You know, we're not doing other things. It's our own location. Lots of space, and come find us and come train. Love to have everyone's welcome to come and come meet us.
Sounds good, man. Well, once again, Darren Sensei, I really want to thank you for coming on because you've been one of my big supporters. Like when you saw like the early days of the show and like you were liking stuff, then you were sharing stuff. So I really appreciate that. I just want to say all in all, like, I'm really glad we got to do this. I really love the chemistry, and to be one of the final 2 guests, cause like I put on a post of, yeah, I got 2 more episodes coming. So like, I didn't want to say who, so I guess, you know, surprise everybody, but I'm really glad we got to do this. And I had so much fun varying it up between martial arts and hockey.
Well, it's been a pleasure, you know, and let's keep in touch. It's always great talking to you, and I'm happy to support anyone who has a passion, right? You're just a student that has a passion, and good for you to take your time to do this. You know, it takes a lot. People, I don't think people understand how much time and effort it takes to do what you're doing and to find people to do all this stuff, and you're not getting paid for it. You're doing it for a love, and good on you for it.
just want to help the art grow. It doesn't matter who. I mean, like, I just want to
Yeah.
help the art grow. But yeah,
Yeah.
guys, make sure to support Sensei Darren. You know, if you're in Ontario, especially, he's an OG in the terms of the karate game and hockey game. If you ever need advice, if you're a kid for hockey in Ontario, ask him. If you live in other provinces, I don't know, still ask him anyways. He'll tell you what he thinks, and make sure to support him in any way. He's a gem to the community.
Well, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
listen, have great holidays. Happy New Year.
Thank
And
you.
we'll speak soon.
You know it.